Welcome to the Smart Buildings Academy podcast. Today we are on episode 431, Seal the Deal, Winning Strategies for Securing Service Agreements. I'm your guest host today, Julian Palacios, Director of Sales and Business Development here at Smart Buildings Academy. So welcome folks. Hopefully you enjoyed today's episode. I'm going to go through just the whole process of pursuing, securing, and building out a service agreement business, whether you're a salesperson trying to build out that in your portfolio or you're a business leader um, trying to build out that aspect of your business and creating that recurring revenue stream. Tell you a little bit about myself since I haven't done that in previous episodes. So I'm probably 17, 18 years in the industry now. Started my career at a major OEM, spent 12, 13 years there. Spent some time in private equity and then some time with an independent systems integrator. And in all of those different business experiences, the service agreement, recurring revenue stream models just consistently coming up. Something I've always consistently wound up working on, and we'll dive into some of the things I've learned that could help you in your business today. So we'll go through identifying opportunities. How do we figure out where to chase service agreements? How do we put together a proposal for them? Something that's compelling that a customer will decide to move forward with. How do you win, especially if there is competition, or what are you up against? In some cases, your competition is doing nothing at all, or reactive maintenance, as folks like to call it. How do we navigate some risks and challenges? And then we'll kind of recap everything we discussed. So we'll get started here. Identifying opportunities. I would say, if we're looking at service agreements and depending on your business and what you offer, I'll try to focus this on building automation specifically. Um, you know, there are a number of ways to pursue or identify these opportunities. Now, the most broad is every building with an automation system should be my customer. Excuse me. They should need a service contract. And that's super broad and probably not the best definition for you and your business. The place I would start, and if I were consulting, for you, which I've done in the past as well, is looking at your own book of business, your own what I call installed base. Where have you installed product and done work in the past? That is your starting point denominator for addressable market in terms of service contracts. And the quickest wins are probably going to be installs that you most recently completed, especially if they're net new buildings, right? Straight up from the ground new, or new organizations that, you won the construction job and now the owner's moving in or moved into the building and that's a new owner to you. It's a great opportunity to start the discussion around um, service contract. And what is it that we're going to talk about, right? What is it that we're going to offer? Service contracts can, the beauty and the curse of them is they can be just about anything to anybody. So it could be a block of hours, right? And I remember one organization I was in, loved block hours, and another one did not like block hour contracts. And these are contracts where you're basically pre-selling labor hours. So, hey, Mr. Owner, we're going to sell you um, 96 hours for the year, so 8 hours a month. Use them as you need to for whatever comes up, and you get this preferred rate, etc. Excuse me. So that's your most basic form of a service agreement that I've seen out there. Other agreements are schedule based, preventative maintenance, quarterly, monthly visits with some scope of work and tasking associated with each visit. Some organizations will differentiate visits and say, okay, three of these visits are operational and they're kind of light touch. And then there's one comprehensive visit where we're going to do, be there more time, longer visit, do more, system backup and some other tasking that we only do annually, right? Um, Going beyond that, you have now in the marketplace, you see, I don't want to call it necessarily predictive maintenance, but maybe more outcome based maintenance. So we're going to sell you on uptime, or we're going to sell you on being able to predict and prevent failure. We're going to sell you a digital solution that, makes the service more autonomous and 24/7, constant monitoring. So instead of seeing someone on a regular basis, you're only going to see our technicians as needed because the analytics and the data will tell us what you need and when you need it. And so, the service contract looks like that. And in order to sell those kinds of agreements, obviously the system installed has to have all those capabilities, right? You have to have probably a newer system or some type of device that is then taking data from your existing BAS up to the cloud into someone's platform on the cloud where they're doing AI analytics and delivering those kinds of results. So, just a wide range of potential offerings out there. For those of you in sales, you really got to nail down what it is you and your organization have to offer and what's the value of what you have to offer because this is very much a value sale. Um, so that's kind of starting point of identifying opportunities is what's my install base? What's my value proposition? Where in my install base does my value proposition apply? Right? Where does it make sense? Does it make sense in a particular vertical? Does it make sense with, only buildings that are at a certain um, revision of software or have certain assets installed? And I would encourage you to also ask and get educated on where might be some traps that exist. And by trap, I mean selling a service contract to an owner where you've installed product, you've installed the system, but it was maybe 10 years ago. And so the hardware at that site nearing end of life, or maybe they've received end of life notices or no longer being supported, etc. You can fall into a little bit of a pickle if you're trying to sell a service contract to a customer with a system that is in need of modernization because you're going to find yourself stuck in this kind of limbo of I'm committing to take care of a system that needs to be modernized. The customer may not be on board with modernizing. And depending on how I wrote the contract or how my organization writes these contracts, I could be putting the organization at financial risk. Um, you know, some of those financial risks could be uh, labor time of your technicians not being covered or material not being covered that needs to be replaced, and that all being kind of expected as part of the contract. And that kind of leads me to the other variable, which is, and I've seen this in the marketplace where a lot of service contracts are what we'll call just a basic kind of contract. What's in the scope is what is covered and what you're going to deal with. And then there are other types of contracts that are similar to the more outcome based contracts where we're co- we're covering additional labor, we're covering additional material, almost like an insurance policy, right? The owner pays a set dollar amount for the year, and anything that happens in general, save for like acts of God, are covered by the service contract. And those are, they can be very lucrative and they could pay off if nothing bad happens. And then if there are a lot of repairs or a lot of issues, you could wind up, you know, losing money on a contract simply because it's more labor intensive or material intensive than you had originally estimated and anticipated. Now, for organizations that do that, typically the goal is to have a book of business that is profitable, right? Because you're going to have some contracts that win, some contracts that lose. You want your book to be full of more winners than losers, and you can build from there. I've also seen this pop up with organizations that offer these digital services, digital solutions, like I mentioned earlier, the analytics, the AI, etc. Um, they will include or cover additional, labor, material, etc., almost like that security insurance blanket. And they do so because the thought process is the technology is mitigating the risk. And again, that's all great. Get educated on what you and your organization have to offer, because you're going to have to be able to articulate that clearly to an owner. And in particular, what's the value? So, before I pivot off of identifying opportunities, I'll just share some of my own experience here with that. Um, if I were dropped into any one of your organizations at this point, tomorrow, like, hey, Julian, you work for X company now, and your job is to sell service. Um, I need to figure out the opportunity. So first thing I'm going to do, what's the install base? Where have we done work in the last 5 years? Where have we installed new systems or upgraded, modernized systems in the last 5 years? Give me that list. I'm going to go to the dispatch folks and I'm going to say, hey, which technician has, of their 2,000 hours in a year that they work, who has the majority of their hours already booked up in service work? I've seen situations where some technicians have 2,500 hours of service assigned to them in a year. Well, they only work about 2,000 hours a year, so they're so overbooked just managing service. But I want to know who those technicians are, and I want to talk to them real quick to find out why do all these customers um, keep renewing these service agreements. What is it that we're doing as a company? What is it that you're doing on site? I'm going to glean those nuggets of value from that individual. Then I'm going to pivot to my install team, and I'm just going to get a list of, tell me all the customers we've installed jobs at that you can, off the top of your head, name that could benefit from a service contract. And typically, these are going to be organizations that need support with their system. They're um, technically credible and dangerous on a BAS, but they don't know everything, so they can use some help. Well, here we are to help. Um, then outside of those two first steps, I'm gonna then do what's called lookalikes. I'm gonna look for customers that look like all the best prospects I just learned about, right? So maybe my organization does well with schools and school districts. Well, then I'm gonna look for school districts of similar size that we don't do business with, that we don't have service with, and go after them. Um, and use some of the same, let's call it, credibility, that hey, we do business with these other school districts, they love us, I have a referral, feel free to call, John Smith, my customer over here. He can tell you all about us. um, so those would be the key things I do, is go through the existing customer base, go through the existing project customer base, build off of that, identify lookalikes. And then for those of you in organizations that do more than just BAS, how can I, how could you leverage the other lines of business, the other domains to get in the door, right? So if you're in an organization that does BAS and mechanical, how do you leverage mechanical to get in on the BAS side? Maybe you guys do power or you do access control, same thing, same concept. And again, starting with the low hanging fruit is always your existing customer base and people already know who you are and have felt comfortable enough to give you money in the past, and maybe feel comfortable enough they have are willing to give you money today and into the future. So that's what I would do in terms of opportunity identification. So then we move into, you found an opportunity or several, hopefully, and you're pursuing them and you have to propose something. And coming up with, I'm sure there every organization has their standard proposal doc. You have kind of some of your talk tracks that you've been coached on what to say, what we do, and you know, you start there as a starting point. But selling service, the most important thing you could do is figure out what your customer needs. What are their pain points? What do they actually need? Why would they buy a service agreement? um, you're going to run into clients who are, or potential clients, who might just believe in run to fail, right? I don't need a service agreement. I've had BAS systems for years. I'll just call when something's wrong, because that might happen once a year. That might happen twice a year, every couple years. But I believe in the long run, I'm better off just run to fail. I will call you when I need you. Don't worry about me. That is a tough customer to sell to. And the only way you're going to compel them to even consider a service agreement, or if I rephrase that, the only way you're going to compel them to consider doing something different than what they're used to and what they believe works, is to peel back the onion and identify some underlying pain, potential pain, risk, and needs. Because if they're saying something like that to you, they think the risk of just running to fail is totally worth it because they'll save enough in the long run versus your service agreement. So that's one challenge. The other challenge, other than just, buy in on whether or not service is the right thing to do, is customers understanding what it is you offer and what it is they're getting for the money they're going to pay you. So if it's a simple block of hours, that's easy to communicate. You're going to pay us X dollars annually. You're going to get Y block of hours you can use as you need, whenever you want, during regular hours. And this is a savings over calling us for just time and material work, right? That's pretty straightforward. It's a financial play. It's a security play because, I've also heard organizations position it like, if you're a service customer and a lot's going on, you get priority, which is true. Service customers do get priority in most organizations. So that's one um, compelling, potentially, way of positioning your service agreement. But let's say you sell tasking based service agreements, or time schedule based, 3 visits, 3 operational visits, 1 annual visit kind of thing. Then your challenge in creating a compelling proposal is finding many customer pain points and many customer needs, and tying them to as much of the tasking in your proposal as possible, as much of the scope of work as you can. So, um, let's say in your annual visit, you have scoped in there upgrading the software for the building automation system, right? We'll give you an annual software upgrade. That's fine, well, and good. But to an average owner, well, why do I need that? Why should I care? What is the compelling reason to worry about that? And depending on which product you represent, what you're installing, there's a lot of different answers, but they usually fall into a broad category of, well, cybersecurity. Every year, actually more often than that, every few months, these OEMs are putting out patches and updates to enhance the security of their system. So that's one compelling reason. Another compelling reason is potentially, hey, every time they roll out new software, every time this manufacturer rolls out the latest and greatest version, you there's a number of features and enhancements you get just from doing the upgrade. You don't have to pay extra other than just the cost of the subscription for the software and the labor to install it. And in that example, it's always good to have some answers to the key follow-up question, which would be, well, what have they done in the past? Right? That way you can talk about how from version A to version B, they got these 6 enhancements. And when this manufacturer went from B to C, they added these 4 enhancements that were pretty game changing. We don't know what, you're currently on version C. Version D is going to probably come out this fall. We don't know everything that's in there, but if you're in a service contract with subscription, you're going to get that. We'll schedule the install on and on down the list, right? So being able to articulate the compelling reasons for software, big part of a service contract in this example. The other, visits in this operational comprehensive kind of model, you have to really hone in on why should I, as a building owner, care that you're sending a technician over to my site every quarter? What is that person going to do? And how is that activity create value for me or mitigate risk for me? And so, depending on your org and the manufacturer you install, the answers are going to vary, but you have to focus on those areas, and you're not going to know which areas to focus in on the most unless you're probing and asking questions of the customer about what's important to them. What experiences have you had in the past with automation systems? What are some challenges that they've caused for you in your career? What are some things that you worry about right now with the current system or your current situation? What's keeping you up at night? And then taking their responses and peeling back the onion even further to identify whether or not you can tie what you do and what you have to offer to the pain and fears that they may have. So that's kind of high level how you have to go about figuring out, what what you offer is going to have value. Um, if I jump kind of to that next level of connect your building automation system to our cloud, our analytics, our fault detection diagnostics, our predictive analytics, et cetera, et cetera. Um, Again, all these things, and it's been my experience this way. All those things sound awesome. They sound really cool. Um, if you're kind of a techie person, it's intriguing. But eventually somebody's got to make a decision when it comes to dollars and cents. And the question is going to come up inevitably: how does this benefit me financially as a building owner? Where are you taking pain away or mitigating risk? Right. And again, it's no different than the other service model examples I used. It's the same. You're having to do the same thing, addressing these concerns, just with a different set of features and benefits. And let me be clear, I'm not saying to go on a feature and benefit dump. That's the last thing you should do. You need to focus on what is the outcome or the impact. So, as an example, um, went through a situation. I found it really compelling the first time I saw it, and it made for a compelling discussion with the building owners. Uh, if you connect your building automation system to our cloud, and the cost of doing that is relatively minimal, parking ticket kind of cost. We have built-in analytics that don't go to you; they go to our service operations team, and our service operations team will see the analytics and see the warning lights, right? The yellow, the orange, the red warning, and they have process and structure in place to respond and to address it. So maybe a yellow generates an email to you and your organization. Hey, check this out. Found it interesting. Could be one of these 3 issues. Recommend these 3 actions. Let us know if you need anything. Right? Maybe that's what happens on a yellow. An orange might actually generate a phone call right away in the morning. Hey, Tom, it's Julian. Just got into my chair as the service operations person. I noticed the analytics have this orange warning. Uh, Usually, this is a concern. Suggest dispatching a technician. We could have, Scott over there later this morning if that works for you, right? That's another way of doing it. And then the reds obviously generate immediate phone calls or even after hours. Now, that's all great. What's a value to me as a customer, as a building owner? Well, there are things that the analytics will see 24/7, right? You have people on site 9 to 5, 8 to 4, whatever it is. They see what's going on during the day if they're looking. Well, the machine, the AI is always looking. And then it's letting us, your service provider, know what's going on so that we can provide you, the building owner operator, the best guidance. And then you, the decision maker, can decide what course of corrective action you're going to take. Are you going to have us come out? Are you going to have one of your own folks handle the situation and close the loop to make sure it's, with us to make sure it's taken care of? Or are you going to ignore it? And the value of what I'm discussing, right? This example is you have not just another set of eyes and ears in a great technician from my org helping you, but you have the intelligence of the platform we built helping you 24/7, right? And it will identify things, and you have to have compelling stories. One story I always like to share in that example was uh, we could identify when someone overrode a piece of equipment and it kept running more than it normally runs. The AI knew that this rooftop unit for the last 12 hours was running when it normally doesn't run during this date of the week, time of day, outdoor air conditions, etc. And so that generated a orange or yellow warning, and then the service ops team reached out to the owner, got it corrected, and moved on. Well, what's the value of that? Well, okay, I'm not running my equipment anymore. Great. Well, the value goes beyond that. And this is where you have to articulate it as a salesperson and as an ops team if you're already executing. By identifying the equipment running too long, I just saved you run hours on your equipment. I saved you utility costs that you would have kept incurring until someone eventually figured out, hey, this is overridden and no one released the override. Um, and then the additional maintenance costs that happens when you run equipment nonstop. So there's all of this additional financial impact. How many of those situations need to happen in a year for the service contract you're going to sign with me to pay for itself? Maybe one, maybe two. It's not high, or at least in this example, from what I remember, it was not high. So it made the compelling argument that for a few $1,000s a year, it was very well worth it to engage in a service contract with services at that level. So, longer story, just wanted to kind of get it all out there to share um, a little bit of how I've experienced having to articulate value, having to demonstrate that, having to have examples for prospects so that they kind of hear a compelling story that ties the service offering I have, whatever it might be. Again, could be as simple as block hours, as complicated as, you know, um, outcome based predictive maintenance in the cloud, and everything in between. Have to be rock solid on what you offer, have to be rock solid on how you tie that to their pain and their needs. So then winning the service agreement. So demonstrated some value. Are you up against competition? What are you up against that could prevent you from moving forward? Um, this could be a couple of different things. I'll start with the one that's, typically in my experience, the most common. You're up against yourself, right? You're up against your own organization, your what you and your organization have done to either build or erode trust with that building owner operator, and what your reputation is from having done this in the past with other owner operators. And that's probably one of the biggest hurdles. Like I remember distinctly early in my sales career, just struggling on the service agreement side and hearing, you know, consistently like, well, we had a service contract with you guys like 4 years ago, and we really didn't see the value, and we had some meetings, and it just didn't make sense to keep it going. So we canceled it, and we just call you guys out when we need you. Um, so we're not sure we want to, have that conversation again about a service contract. And inherently, like at the core of that message is the simple issue I spent some time on already. The customer didn't see the value in the agreement. They didn't perceive to be getting something from it that they couldn't already do for themselves. And the service agreement wasn't taking away a risk that was big enough for them to be really worried about it. And so that to me, you know, no offense to the folks who preceded me in those situations, but no, there was a failure to connect value of what the organization provided to the needs of the client, prospect, owner, operator, whatever you want to call them. And so that's one issue you might run into is, well, we've done this with you in the past and we're not sure we got a lot out of it. Number two, you might run into well, you guys did the install and I wasn't all that happy with it challenge. And that's just the nature of the world we live in. Um, you know, if you're on an install team, I'm not bashing you. I'm in your corner. I know sometimes things get value engineered out. Sometimes things are not communicated clearly to the owner. Sometimes the owners don't fully understand, what is in the scope, and they think they're getting something that was never really in there. And again, going back, maybe it was and it was VE'd out. So if you're selling a service contract, you are going to run into that challenge of, hey, I'm not happy with the install. Why would I buy service? And this is where you have to delicately and in a very sophisticated way use all your sales skills to navigate that conversation. You don't want to throw anyone under the bus on the install side, whether it's your org, the mechanical, or the engineer. Or you don't want to insult the owner, mm, you know, by alluding to maybe they didn't fully understand what they were or were not buying on the installation side. And you also need to build a case for your service agreement, all while kind of keeping everybody in a safe place. And that is not an easy task. Um, And so there is, an approach. I wouldn't say it's formalized in any way, but the approach I took doing this was always to be curious and helpful, educational, and non-committal. And that might be a turnoff to some of you, like non-committal. What does that mean? But I'll get to it. So the first thing is curiosity. Customer starts talking. I'm not happy with XYZ that was done in the past. Okay, that's interesting. I wasn't part of that. Would you please, help me understand what it is that was an issue? What are your concerns? What are you still unhappy with? What happened? I just would like to understand. That is your best move because it gets them talking and it helps you understand what went on, especially if you really weren't around for that project or weren't working on it. And they will communicate to you, not directly, but they will communicate to you in what they share with you, what their needs and pain points and concerns are. Because if something from install is still bothering them, there's a reason for that. And your job as a sales professional is to probe and find out the reason. Why okay, you didn't like that. Can I ask why? What does that impact? How's that affecting you today? Okay, that's interesting. Good to know. You need to acknowledge what they're saying. And then when I say, um, being non-committal is you can commit to following up. Like, I've learned a lot from you today. I'm going to take this back and try and figure out what, if anything, we could do about it. I can't make any promises right here in the room. I'd be blowing smoke if I did, but I can assure you I will circle back around with you, Mr. Customer, and close the loop. And that's really all you need to commit to and all you need to actually do. Because if you do go and figure out maybe what of what they said was accurate, inaccurate, what could be done, if anything, to, alleviate some of their needs or concerns, and you do close the loop, you have just built a tremendous amount of trust with that prospect. Because I can assure you, no one else has done that if they're still complaining. If it's still an issue, if they still have a pain point there, no one has followed through, closed the loop, um, or taken time to educate and help them understand, right? So, talked about the customers that had contracts that didn't see value, talked about customers that, maybe have some pain from install. Um, Maybe everything went well, install was phenomenal, and now you're thinking to yourself, "Well, I'm sitting pretty. I'm gonna get a contract, no problem." And that could be one of the toughest sales you have because financially, you know, there's a financial buyer, probably someone different than the person who made the financial decision on the project. And that financial buyer is worried about operational costs. And here you are proposing anything from a five, six, 15, $60,000, $160,000 service agreement. And they have to figure out how to fit it into the operational budget, and they have to justify the why. And so that, even in those situations, it keeps coming back to connecting the dots between what you have to offer and what their needs are, what their risks are, what the impact is to their business, you know. And as I say that, it brings to mind their different needs by verticals. I loved manufacturing because, especially manufacturing that was environment dependent, because that meant that keeping the indoor environment a certain way impacted production of the materials or the products they were producing, which has a direct impact on their P&L. So it is easy to, or easier, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's easier to justify investment in risk mitigation through service when the occupant's entire revenue stream is dependent on the quality of product coming out the door and the volume of product coming out the door. And if that's impacted by the HVAC system and the automation system in some way, then obviously can tie value there. You move over to different verticals like schools, K through 12 or higher ed. Um, in a post COVID pandemic world, things like indoor air quality matter. Things like uptime, keeping the kids comfortable, preventing wasted utility. Because some of these organizations, if they're not already, they may become cash strapped as enrollment numbers drop off. The population shrank a bit, so we have that issue. Um, so again, it's tying what you have to offer in the service agreement to those things that matter to that org. Healthcare is pretty straightforward, keeping people from getting sick or more sick if they're already in the hospital, clean environments, etc. So you have to be ready to have discussions around all these different challenges and topics based on the vertical as well. So let me think. As far as actionable steps to manage risk and challenges in your own pursuits here, the I would say, it's a broad term to say qualify, right? But you need to ask a lot of questions and be very curious. One of my favorite TV shows has a great clip where, they quote Walt Whitman. It's like, be curious. Um, in sales, that's part of your job is to be curious because in asking questions and probing, you're going to get the information you need to come up with the right solution for that particular prospect in that particular situation. Um, I think the other thing that you need to do if you're out there in sales pursuing is have a certain amount of technical credibility because these conversations are going to go technical. Not in a way where you need to be able to explain everything in very detailed technical jargon, but what you need to be able to do is communicate that you understand the technology, you understand the way the system's designed to work, and because of that, you also understand the risks that exist for that particular business or occupant. And the biggest challenge for all of us is how do we convey that in language that the prospect is going to understand in a way they're going to understand. If you start, HVAC jargon dumping on them, you're probably going to see some eyes glaze over and you're going to make that prospect potentially uncomfortable because you're just trying to demonstrate your expertise. And, I share this with sales folks I've led throughout my career. No prospect cares about how good you feel about your expertise. What they care about is how is your expertise helping them and taking their headaches away. So communicating um, in a very um, clear, concise, let's call it non-jargony kind of way is super critical, especially if your organization is offering some of these data-driven, technology-driven service solutions. These are gonna go over people's heads unless you simplify it. If you ask the folks that work for me, they hear me say ad nauseum, doggy, piggy, bunny. And I picked that up from someone who I worked for years and years ago. You have to be able to explain things, at least to start in doggy, piggy, bunny fashion, like a story, a simple children's story. And then from there, allow your prospect to probe and go deeper on the technical side. Um, so those would be the things I would say you need to do to work on improving your pursuit of service agreements in the future. So, wrapping up, been talking a long time. I'll be honest with you folks, this is the first episode I'm doing with just myself and the screen. So staring at myself is getting boring. Um, but we talked about identifying opportunity, proposing, how do you win, overcome risks and challenges when it comes to these service agreements. And again, I've hammered home a couple of times how what you all out there offer can vary from the very simple to very complex service agreements, and your pricing strategies will vary. So if you're in sales, really understand what it is your organization's doing because that's key. You need to understand your house first. Um, but if I'm going to recap, right, how do we go identify opportunities? Start within, right? Installed base. And if your organization doesn't have an installed base, which is a list of every place you've sold or installed product at, ask why. Because that is low hanging fruit. And every organization I've been in, have either built it or it had had one existing. You can build prospecting, marketing, sales strategies all off of that install base. And as your manufacturing OEM partner comes out with different offerings and solutions, guess what? Your quickest way to target is leveraging that install base. So, install base would be number one. How do I identify opportunities? Figure out who we've installed product with, who's already a customer of ours but not a service customer, and how do we turn them all into service customers? And I would go there before I pursue my competitors, you know, customers. Um, Number two, proposing. This is, pick your favorite sales methodology, but This is all about qualification, and identifying needs, right? Identifying your prospect's needs, understanding your prospect, and tying your offering to their needs. If you don't know what they need, if you've been talking nonstop in a meeting, like I've been talking nonstop on this episode, then you've not been listening. And your job as a salesperson in this case, and in many cases, is to listen. And you need to ask really good questions so that you can listen to those answers and then pull from those answers what the needs are that your solution will address. As far as winning, it's really reiterating and hammering home in a doggy, piggy, bunny kind of way how your solution, your service contract offering, whatever the scope might be, how this addresses the needs you heard the prospect um, express in a previous conversation. And you need to be explicit and direct in, talking about that. So, like, for example, Mr. Customer, you said utilities were a big concern. Last year, you feel like you wasted 15% you could have saved in utility costs. Some of that could be attributed to how the system was operated. Um, for that reason, I'm including in this proposal our monitoring services because we will catch these issues sooner than the humans would catch them from 9 to 5, right? I'm tying part of my offer to a need I heard expressed. And that's what you want to do when you are presenting a proposal. It is not, here's my price, here's my scope, read it. It's sit down, have a conversation, and say, I think I've got this down. I listened to a lot of what you had to say. You had a number of needs. I captured them. Here they are. I'm going to address each need with this contract in the scope of work. Let's take a look at that scope of work and I'll point out, I'll connect some dots for you so you can see it. And then we can move forward with this service agreement. The only thing I think I missed that I recognize now I had written down but glossed over, um, negotiating terms, meaning by term I mean 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year, whatever. I would always go after multi-year, so typically 3 to 5 years, and get customers locked in. Every organization I've been at, the customers have a way out. They're not locked in for the full 5 years. With 30, 60, 90-day notice, they can get out of the agreement down the road. But going after the multi-year agreement is smart because once you lock it in, you've locked that customer and that site up for you as a service provider for that period of time. Um, It also gives you the opportunity every year to have a discussion with that customer about scoping up, adding more to the service agreement, or doing a small retrofit, or doing a major project, and really giving special, not special treatment, but let's call it basis of design to you and your organization because, well, you already take care of all the other facilities and all the other systems. So, and you're happy with us, so let's just keep this going. So yeah, multi-years, big deal. From a pricing standpoint, I typically um there's a let's call it a better discounted price. The annual price looks more attractive in a multi-year deal than if you go single, which pretty straightforward kind of stuff. So, um that is high level going after and securing service agreements. I don't see any questions in the chat, but if you guys do have questions, don't hesitate to reach out, email, LinkedIn, the chat on our SBA website, whatever you want. We are super happy to help. If you want help developing your technical credibility or even some of your sales credibility and building out your skill set to pursue this kind of business, definitely sign up for our free skills assessment. You can find that at www.smartbuildingsacademy.com. /skills. Take the skills assessment. It's no cost to you, and we'll show you where you have some knowledge and skill gaps that we could help you close when it comes to either being technically credible or prepared to have some of these conversations from a sales perspective with prospective owner operator clients of yours. So I hope you check that out. Our next episode, I encourage you all to tune in. We're going to have a really interesting topic. It's a roundtable discussion on lessons learned from creating our workforce development program. So we're going to have some folks from our instructional team, our operations team, our sales team, and leadership team um, on that episode to talk about what it took to create it, what we're seeing, both success and challenges, and how we believe that's the way we're going to help this industry attract talent, develop talent quickly, and address all these issues that we are having with workforce in this industry. So definitely check that out later this week. I really appreciate all your time. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.